Manitoba Forward is a federally incorporated, not-for-profit organization. Before we incorporated, we developed a policy framework. A copy of the principles were provided when you came in, or you can get off our webpage. While we are an apolitical organization, it's fair to say that we could be roughly defined as being fiscal conservative and socially progressive. We began active in 2013-14, quickly concluding that the then provincial government had lost its way from at least a fiscal perspective. Through up to the election day in 2016, we were quite public, criticizing policies and actions that we felt were ruining Manitoba's future forecasts. Since the election, we continue to focus on our views of fiscal management, finding disappointment and slow progress being made on fiscal stability by not only the new provincial government, but by, in particular, the city-state, which is Winnipeg. We've become concerned that needed major reforms to government departments, crowns, and corporations, and the major drawers of tax funds in the form of municipal government and their utilities, along with provincial health, education, and social services, are not occurring. We have growing concerns that the next provincial election will bring results moving Manitoba even further away from what we would like to see. We seek balanced budgets, lower taxes, more efficient government services, and monopoly operations. Hydro, NPI, WCB, lotteries, and liquor. We would like a more balanced economy, one where the private sector would hold a bigger slice, bringing competition, jobs, and efficiency. Now, I have the great pleasure of introducing our speaker tonight, Steven Fletcher. Born in Brazil, educated in Winnipeg, he holds 2 degrees, geological engineering in 1995 and an MBA from 1997. At the U of M, Steven was elected as president of the university's student union. And in that capacity, he met with Paul Martin, seeking increased student funding. Steven brings together a professional education and an extensive public service at both the federal and provincial level. At the federal level, he served as a cabinet minister. His first cabinet stint was as Minister of State, Democratic Reform, then later as Minister of State, Transport. He brings those federal experiences with him into his current role as an MLA elected under the PC flag. He has extensive political experience. My quick summary needs further elaboration. Steven, perhaps drawing on his experience as Minister of State, Democratic Reform, now as an MLA, though not in a provincial cabinet, he tests his own provincial government, seeking the best it could do. He has pursued a business plan for the new plan, Efficiency Manitoba, criticizing his own party while seeking what is in the public interest. He's also drafted a new Conflict of Interest Act, placed it on the legislative agenda as a private member bill. As a fact, he has written 9 private members' bill over the period of 1 year. Tremendous productivity. He has found weaknesses in the current approach, and again in the public interest, sought unsuccessfully so far to close weaknesses on some of those matters. With respect to the recently passed Efficiency Manitoba bill, he did what he could to derail a bill that he supported by many outside the legislature, going so far as to conduct a filibuster on 2 occasions, bringing out the weaknesses in the support base for the new crown. So what we have here tonight is a rather unique MLA, one with immense political experience, one that has and is willing to publicly critique even his own government when he feels criticism is appropriate and in the public interest. So please join with me in welcoming our tonight's speaker, Steven Fletcher.
Thank you very much, Graham, for that generous introduction. My dad would be proud, and my mom might even believe you. I'd also like to acknowledge the Manitoba Forward group. This is a group that of experienced individuals who have had spectacular careers in their respective areas. And other than enjoying retirement, they have contributed to public debate. We're here tonight. People have put a lot of effort into Manitoba Forward on dozens of issues. There was little time to prepare for those legislative committees, but one Forward Manitoba was one of the only five presenters that turned out and made very good presentations. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence here of Dorothy Dobie, former Member of Parliament, Winnipeg South. Of course, I was just a kid, Dorothy, but you left an impression. So thank you for being here, Dorothy. And also Peter Hawley, Frontier Center, think tank, and think tanks are critical, even if, right wing, left wing, whatever, they're critical to public debate and discourse. So you're not dealing with academics from the university, you're not dealing with bureaucrats or individuals, but you have people who can analyze situations without the inherent biases of whatever institution others may have. I also like to acknowledge Dean Liberté. I say it's Liberty, but I say Liberté because I've been in Ottawa too long. And the reason why it's Garland, when I saw him, I know the name, and he came up to me and presented it. I know the name. I don't recognize the person. I know the name. And then I connected the dots and said, that is the Dean of Engineering. When I was going through engineering in 1990. It's like, wow. And as I said at committee, that first year of engineering was the worst year of my academic life. Dean or one of your colleagues, when we started, said, look to your right and look to your left. Because in 4 years, those people won't be there. Sad but true. Anyway, to business. We're here to talk about good policy and how that leads to good politics. The other thing that you could say is good policy, to have good policy, you need good information. And that's why I have some information for you. I have maps, and they're not really here for you guys to be able to examine from sitting way off in the distance, but I have it as a visual representation of information, critical information that you will need as a public policy person to make decisions. And I'll give you some concrete examples in a few minutes. In front of you, you have, you should have about 10 separate documents, most of which are private members' bills on a wide range of issues. And I'll discuss them, but I'm not going to discuss each of them. So I'll leave it up to you to read based on your level of interest. But it goes from recognition of roadside cemetery or its historic significance to the aforementioned conflict of interest to filling in loopholes in various pieces of legislation to reducing the number of MLAs in the Manitoba legislature. That really made me a lot of friends. There should also be a critique of Bill 19 in that material, and an article about First Nations. I don't know that. It didn't either why. But it was sponsored by the Frontier Center and published in the National Financial Post. Okay, to business. I plan to talk for about 17 minutes and 29 seconds. And then open up for discussion. You guys are here on a beautiful night, on a glorious Manitoba evening, to talk about public policy. So you're obviously strange and geekish, but interested in making our country better. So I think you have as much to contribute to this discussion this evening as anyone else. Before I start, I just want to thank my niece and nephew, Madeline and Henry, who are in the front row here. They are from California. They are here without their parents. And they helped me put the maps together for this presentation. And it's always difficult to know how to display maps. It turns out that election signs from failed federal elections provide excellent backboards for maps. So conservatives are indeed in favor of recycling in some cases. Okay, public policy, let's get to business. Let's talk about Manitoba's conflict of interest legislation. Right now, in Manitoba, each MLA needs to disclose a few things. And the main two things is any mutual funds that you own and any land that you own in Manitoba. Those are the two substantive things. Federally, Stephen Harper introduced the Accountability Act. It's the first piece of legislation, the first substantial piece of legislation that was introduced federally. And it required anyone who was in the ministry, which would be parliamentary secretaries and privy councillors and cabinet, to disclose all their assets, including significant others, any stocks that they may hold, penny stocks, blue chip stocks. Actually, and then if you were in cabinet, you could not own anything other than mutual funds, because you can't control a mutual fund. But you will have information that could affect stocks or ETFs, or even could even buy bank bonds from the Royal Bank, for example, or TD Bank. You could not own anything other than basically land or mutual funds. So I come to the culture here at Manitoba, and the only thing you have to disclose is mutual funds and land that you own in Manitoba. So that's ridiculous to me. And I looked into it, and the law has been like that for decades, crossing all political boundaries. So how do you have a law that only requires disclose mutual funds in the land, essentially. And nothing else. Okay. Especially after my experience on the Federal Treasury Board. People get it when we introduce like what the big deal was. But it's a huge deal. On the Federal Treasury Board, if you know that the company is going to get a license for whatever ahead of time, you can take it ahead of time. You can make a killing on the stock market. Or inside, you know, or maybe not that even with their spouse or their kids. So this was a glaring issue for me immediately. And you know, the government has a lot of things on their plate. And rather than nothing was introduced, so I thought, well, I guess I'm going to do it. So I make a long story short, despite a lot of institutional inertia not to do it, I did it. I actually ended up writing the law for all intents and purposes based on Brad Law legislation and used his framework. And his framework includes everything. You have to disclose all your assets, any stocks, any land, not just in Saskatchewan, but in Canada. And that makes sense, because you can make decisions in Manitoba that affect the value of land at your cottage on regular rates, or New York, or Newton, but whatever. You could also have your spouse or your family member do it one. Right now, there's nothing that would prevent that from happening. And I'm not suggesting for a moment it is happening. But I'm just saying, for peace of mind, we need to build these kind of integrity loopholes or issues. Now, even if it was happening, it would be technically, I guess, in many ways, nothing wrong from a legal perspective, but massive ethical issues. So I went through a thought exercise when we're talking about public policy and creating legislation. And this is my thought. Okay, so we have, what has changed in the last 30 years? Well, the tax laws have changed. We have social media, but significantly, we have tax-free savings accounts. We have registered disability savings plans. We have different rules for RSPs. And we have new legislation coming forward on marijuana. So let's say, let's not get into the issue of the marijuana, but what if somebody, since it's going to fall into provincial hands, let's just go through this thought exercise. What if you were invested in a private company where your spouse was, and you knew that they were going to get a license? And you knew that ahead of time. Or that they weren't going to get a license, and you knew that ahead of time. By the way, you can make a lot of money. Your family can make a lot of money. So what needs to be done? Well, Brad Wall's legislation. That framework. You have to declare your penny stocks, your blue chip stocks, the land holdings, so on and so forth. Another example is mineral claims. We have all heard of the diamond rush in certain parts of Manitoba. And again, I have to agree with you. This is not happening. it's this scenario. If you knew where those mineral claims were ahead of time, and you knew what company it was, because a lot of these are junior venture capital, or go through mining shares, trading out of Vancouver stock exchange. No, penny stocks. And you said that they were going to get a license, but they weren't going to get a license. Whatever, it's a matter. You could make a killing.
Right now, judging by, say, liquor prices, 12 beer here is more than 30 beer in the States.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if the gram of weed is $30 because it's taxed to death, and you know a friend of a friend, you can still get it for 15, why would you spend 30?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, in this example, you have information about the value of land, the value of potential income. So if a stock is worth 1 cent, and you buy it at 1 cent and sell it for 3 cents 3 days later, and do it through your tax-free savings account, how would anyone find out? Like, it'd be pretty much impossible. And CRA had bigger fish to fry than someone trading for cents on the penny market, on the stock market. So that is the kind of scenario. So that is the bill that I came up with, and it was that thought exercise that I used to try and think of every conceivable loophole. Another one was rules have changed for membership of the Treasury Board. Eventually, snooze when it's trying. But it's an important committee, and you don't have to be a cabinet minister to be on it now. And again, I made sure the legislature was Manitoba-ized to reflect current legislative realities. And so Treasury Board is highlighted specifically in my legislation. That legislation is on your own. It's the thick one. It's about 35 pages. That's a very substantial. And there's companion legislation coming down the pipe dealing with lobbyists and staffers and public servants. Let's go to the next issue. Talk about that. We all like our national parks. Everyone goes to a national park. Society, we benefit a lot from resource extraction. The mining industry. They're the largest industry in Manitoba. How many people do that? Thompson, Manitoba right now is losing jobs because they're running out of ore. There's issues around emissions at the smelter and exploration. And commodity prices are in. So when the federal government introduced the budget this past fall, they announced that there was going to be a national park in Manitoba, in the Interlake near Grand Rapids. It's about 4,600 square kilometers. You think, wow, a national park, that's great. Liberals must care about the environment. And isn't this wonderful? And it preserves some unique ecosystems based on reports from like 2000. Okay, what could be wrong with that? Let me tell you. There's what we call the Thompson-Nickel Belt. And the Thompson-Nickel Belt is where all the goodies are for Thompson. And that nickel belt extends right underneath this proposed national park. So Manitoba's oil and future economic growth has just been made into a potential national park. And it's mentioned by name in the budget, federal budget, which is voted on. It took me about 1 nanosecond to realize that. In part, is the excellent education I received at the University of Manitoba. But I have the background to know where the goodies are for mining. So what's going on? I raised it with the appropriate people. Turns out nobody else knew what it was. Nobody. I bet even the regional minister in the federal government, who's in charge of natural resources, did not know that that was going to be in the budget. Because anyone from Manitoba with any sense would have said, no, that's not a good idea. And so what do you do? And to talk about surface, looking at just scratching the surface, you've heard of that expression? Well, at the end of the presentation, I have all the maps. And if you scratch the surface, it's all limestone, so you well, there's little minerals in limestone. Yeah, okay, you're right. Now scratch the surface. You go down 50 meters, or 100 meters, or 200 meters, depending on how far south you are. Then you get into the goodies. And the ore and Manitoba's economic future. So how could they make this decision? Well, commodity prices are in the tank and aren't really exploring at the moment. But some are. So even announcing the national park, the potential of a national park even, reduces investment. We talked about the job losses in Thompson. Now, if you're valet and you're looking, where am I going to put my capital in the world? Am I going to explore where this national park is going to be? Or am I going to do some mining in New Caledonia? So, even the announcement of bad public policy has a direct economic impact. The maps behind me, and I just, because this is so obvious when you see it, and thank goodness for the Manitoba Geologic Survey for having these maps. And bring back the map that's immediately to Dave's map. Can everyone see that purple? Purple's, there's a purple, that's the ore body, and that's the, and the green is the park. So that purple stuff goes right under the green. It's, don't even have to be a geological engineer or even a University of Manitoba graduate to sort of make the connection. But you do need to look at the information or even talk to somebody in the bureaucracy that knows something about what is in the ground in Manitoba. Bureaucracy, you know, that term is thrown around in often in negative ways. I prefer the term public servant because good public servants save our country from ruin. I saw that firsthand when I was at Treasury Board. There was 5 of us running Ambrose, Jim Flaherty, Daves, me, Jay Hill, 5 of us, day in, day out, for the first 6 months of 08 to 09, dealing with the economic crisis. And those public servants saved our country from economic ruin. That's how serious the situation was. So, before we throw the bureaucracy under the bus, which sometimes they deserve, but not every time, we have to look at what would happen without them, or without an efficient process. This park decision would never have been made if somebody had talked to somebody, think tank, a member of the Federal Geologic Survey or the Geologic Survey, or a First Nation community, or anyone that was remotely connected to this part of the land. So it's recommended on a 2,000 workers. So what has happened since then? Well, the province has done more research into finding boundaries of where this nickel belt is. The province has protected the very ecologically sensitive zones, like Little Limestone Lake, and things like that. That is not protected under provincial legislation. You don't need a federal park. So what? Now instead of throwing the fence and other people under the bus, my approach for good public policy, maybe not good politics, was to get the stakeholders together. I got people, First Nations, eco-tourists, environmentalists, based on my past connections as a right-wing naturalist before my accident in the canoeist. The mining community, mining association, someone from the Winnipeg Free Press, and John Gerard. Got them all in the room. I didn't want to be partisan about it. This was too serious to be partisan about it. This was our economic future. Got them all in the room. And after they stopped yelling at each other, focused on the issue. And the issue is this national park, our goal to preserve our natural environment while still allowing our economy to grow. Sometimes it's called sustainable development. So for each argument, I had a reply. I understood what a different perspective was going to say, what the environmentalists were going to say, what the miners were about to say. And I was prepared. I had material ready for it right there. And well, I've addressed that issue since yes, I'm aware of your concern. I have your report right here. And so my proposal was this, that the environmental community focused, along with the federal government, and on a different parliament to preserve that didn't have the economic potential of this area. That was the Seal River watershed. And being a canoeist, I wanted to preserve the whole thing. It's one of the few watersheds in the world that is pristine. There's no communities on it. The closest First Nation is to Dooley Lake. And that's not even a watershed. So and they were represented at this meeting. So, a trade, essentially. And John Gerard, to his credit, attended this meeting, and yet had a little bit of faith to do that, because obviously we're in different parties. And I knew that he would be able to communicate concerns to his colleagues, but also just not throw them under the bus, but present an alternative, perhaps a better alternative. Certainly an alternative that would benefit my niece and nephew, because I want them to be able to grow up and canoe in pristine rivers just like I did. And when they grow up, they ask, well, Steven, what is my inheritance? I say, I'll tell you once you've canoed the Seal River watershed. And once they do that, and they're done, and they come and say, well, what's our inheritance? I say, well, you just canoed it. There's no money. is your independence? That's really what the goal is. Now that watershed is 46,000 square kilometers, which is huge, bigger than Denmark. But there's also no mining claims in that area. There's no infrastructure. There's eco-tourists and 2 lodges. And there's no roads, there's no plan for roads. Hydro has no intention to do anything with that river. You kind of want, I mean, yeah, like, you definitely want Hydro to stay away from that river. Like, what did the seals ever do to us if we were stuck at the Hydro? You know, and you go from beluga whales to caribou, boreal forest to some Arctic tundra. Once that would be Canada's gift to the world. We would meet all our Ukrainians really once. Also, in 200 years, how valuable will that water be? And we still get to do the mining that we need to do, where the infrastructure already is, roads, the power, the airports, all the other infrastructure. Okay, so that's public policy in a different way. So we've done legislation, public policy, we've done sort of creative, nonpartisan public policy. Let's talk about Bill 19. No government ever, or MLA, nobody should ever agree totally with anything anyone else says. If everybody in this room agrees, that would be ridiculous. Because it's something very logical. 2 + 2 = 4. And we could all agree on that. But beyond, like, laws of nature and so on, on social policy or public policy, there should be disagreement. That exists, even in government. And then you come, and that's why you have different political parties and different wings of political parties, and so on. However, sometimes it's very unclear why something happens. And each legislature and each parliament has a different culture. And in the Manitoba context, the first opportunity that existed for me to raise these concerns with an expectation for a reply was at a legislative committee, where I reacquainted with ideas metamorphized into a different body form and met Lord, but you know, Paul Denison, and some other people who have been very involved in public policy debate. And anyway, figure out why the government would introduce a bill that would try and reduce or create a new corporation that would try and reduce the demand of another product, another corporation produces in electricity, when the supply for that product far exceeds the demand and will for the rest of our lifetimes. And the price goes up. And that goes against everything I learned at the Asper School of Business. Supply goes up, demand goes down, price should go down. But no, not in Manitoba. Nobody found a way to increase supply, like far beyond anything that we could possibly have foreseen. And now we're creating a Crown corporation to reduce the demand for that supply. Now, there may be one scenario where that would be a good idea. That's maybe if you're dealing with like nuclear waste, right? You don't want to oversupply nuclear waste. Or, I don't know, some biological weapons. But oh, remember, we have the cleanest power in the Western world. 97% of the power generated by Manitoba hydro is clean power. Green power. And it's greener than even what those guys in Ontario say. Nuclear power, green. I would like to, I like that public policy to be. So, what is going on? Well, apparently, I was told that we ran on this issue. I was like, whoa, wow, I did not know that. And it turns out that I checked, and we didn't run on that issue. Did not run on the issue of creating a new Crown corporation. I was told that it was in the minister's mandate. I looked that up, obviously, because I was like, wow. Because actually, I read all the mandate and all their policy briefs. When I first was elected in MLA, and they were appointed just because knowledge is in itself power and influence. And I don't remember that. So I would notice that. New Crown Corporation. No, it wasn't in the minister's mandate letter either. It was introduced in the legislature on a Thursday. Efficiency Manitoba. Just before question period, I read it. During the question period, it took me maybe 20 minutes to read the bill, because I had to read it twice to realize what the heck, or to confirm what I read the first time. That is a demand side management Crown corporation that has huge powers dealing with not only hydropower, but central gas and potable water, drinkable water. Why? What the heck? I don't remember running on any of that. And so I actually didn't vote to the leadership of the party. As soon as that was, at the end of the question period, they had a note expressing my surprise, more than a concern. Because it's that obvious. Especially if you have an excellent education from the University of Manitoba. It's funded your first year academic performance. And more research, it just made less and less sense. And then, so the first filibuster, very interesting. 8 days went by. And I wasn't trying to, I raised my issues, that's it. 8 days went by before the media noticed. See, I recognize one member from the media here. And they have a role to play in public policy. That this is so important to Manitoba. With all due respect to the media, President, media in our ideal world should have been on top of that, like before the meeting ended. But it was 8 days. And the media, you know, I remember one media person said, well, nobody contacted us. Okay, but I'm not going to do that. So I don't party, you guys. So, yeah, so they got ahead. So they finally got it, read it. Whoa, what's going on? And then you know, and people like Graham Lane and Member Kay and Candice and Peter Hawley and just normal everyday citizens, sort of, and the Taxpayers Association, who have sent a petition. And by the way, they think they were very helpful to me, or I think that's what they were trying to do. But, gosh, it was good. It was kind of bad, because nobody likes being in a situation to speak in contradiction of their party. I can get into all the other flaws about Bill 19. I'm not going to do that because of time. You have a sheet in front of you that, in that pile, that outlines my concerns. I will just say one thing. When I was preparing that sheet, because I do all this stuff in the wee hours of the morning because I didn't get home. And I send it to Staples. They print it. So I have to do this at least 24 hours ahead of time. So I anticipated that Trump would going to withdraw from the Paris Accord. And that's, for my recommendations for caucus, was Trump is going to withdraw, and based on that, we should use that as a reason to reflect on Bill 19. Because when the facts change, public policy needs to reflect whatever the facts are. And for the credibility of my paper, that's exactly what Trump did. Ironically, on the same day that we were going to be voting on the legislation. So, actually, public policy, with all due respect to my opposition friends and colleagues, Trump had made the announcement. And we went through an entire question period without the issue coming up. It's like the opposition didn't even know. Like that was, I think that's a big deal. It's topical. It affects Manitoba. It affects Canada. It deals with the economy. There are so many ramifications as far as competition and environment and debates. But no, even though it was on every news broadcast, and every news tweet thing, it did not come out in the question period. No one sent a note, an MLA saying, "Oz, you should look at this." No, obviously no one. The media sent a note in saying, "What do you think about this?" No one asked. So if you look at that, I'm actually the first guy to raise the fact that Trump withdrew from the Paris Accord. How did I do that? Well, if you look at the record, there's something called a grievance MLAs could bring up once a session. And I was raising a grievance because I was really mad about some issues around how parliamentary committees work. When people, regardless of their political background or what they're presenting to committee, from the public, especially on short notice, they need to be dealt with respect, heard, and the substantive pieces of legislation, their contributions need to be reflected upon. That first meeting, they were quite prepared to move immediately after the votes or after the presentations to pass the bill. So obviously one of my comments is, well, how can we do that? We just had these presentations and some pretty good comments came up. And so that's a different, I'm not used to that. And well, that's our consultation. You know, that's what our consultation. That's lip service. And that's not the current government's fault. Because apparently this has been going on for decades in Manitoba. My grievance was a plea to the speaker. First of all, praising her for trying to improve the quorum in the chamber. Well, speaking of that, let's talk about the quorum at legislative committees and respect for the general public. Now, those of you who were at that committee or the following committee know some of the things that went on, and I was just, I was embarrassed. Not for me, but for Canada, for our province, and for the people who, we can do better, we can do much better. And to illustrate that point, I introduced another bipartisan bill which you have, which is to reduce the number of seats in Manitoba. Because I think the greater the competition, the better quality of an MLA we will get. And it saves millions, tens of millions of dollars, far more than a 1.5% pay freeze or whatever. That's not the point of the legislature. It's not, it's to make sure that it is good public policy. You need good people. And one of the ways to do that is increase the competition to get those spots and the resources for whoever's left to make better decisions with the information that can be provided to them with proper staff. All these private members' bills, by the way, I've done by myself. I have no staff to put them together. You have to go through something called legislative council. Turned out not to write the bills, or if they do, it takes forever. So I write them, they're translated, and I introduce them. And I have 30 more in the document. 30 more. And there's a lot of other tools MLAs have, which haven't been used in decades. That exists. It's called something called parliamentary privilege. Dorothy, you know, parliamentary privilege. And one of the roles of an MLA, and it doesn't matter where it's not to just vote blindly. It's to ask questions at appropriate time. And if you can't do it behind closed doors, you're morally obligated to do it at committee or any other venue. And people shouldn't say, oh wow, there's a renegade, a rebel. That's not. I support the premier. He's the right guy at the right time. I support the policies of small C conservatism. However, to varying degree, but I don't, in this particular case, I don't see any redeeming quality from any perspective. And I have a very helpful alternative dealing with the displacement of fossil fuels in adjacent provinces, which maybe I'll save for another day. But I've written extensively about this issue for the last 10 years. And so the public policy is to reduce Canada's GHGs. Then we have to look at Canada And I'm just going to take one shot at Toronto. Just imagine this. People who are concerned with the environment, you know, say, it's called Laurentian liberals. So a Laurentian liberal in the suburb of Toronto gets into their Lexus car, looks out their bulletproof windshield, and they can't see the CN tower. Oh my God. That's global warming. So they can't see it. Then the relative from Western Canada says, well, actually, you're facing the wrong way. You face this way. That's the direction of the CN tower. But they still can't see it. And it's because of smog. So they say, look at that. Smog and GHGs, very different things. GHGs are invisible. Smog is what we call SOx and NOx particulates, sulfur oxides, nitric oxides, and particles in the air. That is pollution. GHGs are something else. So the public needs to be educated as well. And before we start making assumptions and drawing things together, we need to educate not only people who are asked to pass the laws, but the people who advise those people, but most importantly, the people who elect the people who pass the laws on behalf of the people. And that's why when we talk about education, it goes far beyond cursive writing versus printing. It's fundamental concepts and expectations of one's own civic duty and the expectation of the people that those people elect. And finally, I'll just say this. No politician should go into politics expecting it to be a career. There's no guarantee of re-election. Sure, I'd like to be re-elected. I don't have that expectation. It's far more important to do a good job. And people, they vote for you, they may not. I thought I did a good job in 2015, and I did some private member legislation on medical assistance in dying, which had support and ended up changing the law in Canada, even though not one single MP in Parliament would talk about it, at least in the first year. But I thought it was good public policy. And rather than complain about the Supreme Court, just recognize it for what it is and their abilities to do things and work within that system. And the bulk of my private members' bills have become the law of the land in just a few years. And the rest will become the law of the land after a few court challenges. And I thought I did a good job. Thought I got defeated. And that's I was at peace with that. Because I had an opportunity to serve. People said we want to try something else. And I just appreciate the opportunity to serve. And I'm not in any way bitter. I'm just, and at the end of the day, I have my nieces and nephews in town, because I obviously use child labor, or niece and nephew labor, and they help me clean up my offices and the signs. That's one of the best memories of my life. And one of the great honors of my life, I just had my 45th birthday. And the greatest honor of my life is representing the great people of Charles with St. James and Webb and Heading Reed. And even when they don't vote for me, it's still a great honor. So thank you very much. So what do you like to do, Greg?
Would you take a few questions?
Yeah.
Anyone want to ask a question, Steve?
I do.
Please.
I'm really curious about what you think the motivation is for this Bill 19. Why would anybody propose something so?
So the cute blonde in the front question was, why would someone propose bills? The explanation, in part, is the Public Utilities Board is claiming made a recommendation to have a demand-side management framework for third-party entities to be introduced by, and what's in our platform, third-party entity. But what isn't said, it was part of that and/or recommendation. You can do a demand-side management corporation and not build kiosks. Didn't say do a demand-side management crown corporation and build kiosks, which is what we've done. At an insane amount of money, and it just keeps on going up and up. And and that's the rhetoric. Now, I think there are people in this room that are far better able to answer that question than I am. Fundamentally, I can't figure it out. I don't know, Graham, if you want to answer.
Steven's correct. Actually, the first time it was recommended was about 3 or 4 years before. And the issue at that time was exactly what he said. The concept was to have an aggressive DSM and not build kiosks. Because kiosks now is what, $8.7 billion. And the idea was is you could spend about 1/8 of that and have probably the most fanciest DSM program in North America. But we had to do both things. But don't get me going, because we're guilty. Any other questions from others? Yes, please.
Was one of the intentions to increase sales because it's green power? Was there some far-reaching concept there that actually increased demand?
So, yeah, is there a premium for green power? Is another way of, like, can we sell our car because it's green? And that, you know, there's a logic there, except since 2004, we've had the natural gas boom just south of the 49 barrel, which the rural corner of Manitoba is. So that reduces, and the United States has become a net exporter of petroleum, fossil fuels, instead of net importer. And the price of fossil fuel generation has collapsed under Obama and will just take another nosedive after Trump has now withdrawn from the Paris Accord. So any power export incentive, like where we used to get, say, 10 cents on a kilowatt hour, we're lucky to get 3 cents if we can export it, because it's so cheap to generate power now in the States for all sorts of reasons. So the market changes. And again, there's people who are better qualified to answer that. question in this room. But let me just add one more thing. I'm a strong advocate of a east-west grid. And I used to advocate going to Ontario, but they're such a mess. And I'll just look west. And you'll see a series of articles coming out, free press or you don't write, you don't let MLAs publish articles. We'll use Northeast Publication. And which advocates sending power along the same parallels Kanawha out as far as Fort Pickering. So you could displace all that fossil fuel generation in Saskatchewan and or Alberta. And instead of charging a carbon tax, just charge it to those people in Toronto who can't see out their Lexus. And invest in Manitoba green power, rightly or wrongly, but at least the investment is made and gets us out of the mess we have, and actually achieves the stated public policy goal of reducing GHGs. Because in Canada, we look at everything in silos, problems by problems, rather than on a national level. We all have strengths. Quebec and Manitoba could displace huge amounts of fossil fuel generation in Canada and in the United States without the public policy goal. But I don't think it really is. Because if it was, that's the big thing that we do. There's other motivations.
Can I interrupt? When you're talking about displacing fossil fuel, do you mean by using water-generated hydro?
Yes. We have so much.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And you can actually probably reduce the amount, the average per kilowatt hour that people in Saskatchewan and Alberta replace, increase the reliability, and reach that public policy objective of actually reducing GHGs. But again, there's other factors.
Sorry, I don't want to dominate, but again, there's a lot of economic reasons why Newfoundland, Quebec, and Manitoba could not partner in developing markets both within Canada and the US. And this notion that green power is going out the door because of climate change, that's not going to happen. Okay, what Trump did is not go out Paris. He just said it didn't make any economic sense. That's all he said, despite what everybody else is. And the fact is, there's still a market. We've got to find a way to sell our product. The best way to do that is to partner with major suppliers of power.
Thank you for raising Newfoundland. CDC reported just that. So I can tell you this. Muskrat Falls, Churchill Falls, could not happen without massive billions of dollars of federal financing guarantees. I was in the government that provided. That's another story. The other thing about the Muskrat Falls is that, you go through Newfoundland or Labrador to Newfoundland through undersea cable, then undersea cable to Cape Breton, then transmission line through Cape Breton, through the rest of Nova Scotia, through New Brunswick, into the markets in the States. Or they could build a 20-kilometer transmission line into the Quebec grid that for historical, political, and really a lot of very uncomfortable issues that isn't happening. But it's costing us billions of dollars. And I'll eat my hat if they actually get that power to Nova Scotia. So if the federal government's going to raise, I bet it's a probability. I'm not going to use the word raise, but that's a probability. If the federal government's going to invest billions of dollars into a hydro scheme to reduce GHGs. Let's focus on Manitoba. Let's get them to invest in Western Canada for once.
Yeah, please.
We have lots of circumstantial evidence that the previous government ignored certain basic math. Selling power for 3 or 5 cents that cost 18 cents for us to make, and that's a symptom of our problem. And even though you're not at the cabinet table, maybe you should be, do you have an indication that this government is less likely to listen to kind of silliness like that? You know, the 3 cent, 18 cent thing? Are they going down those roads? Or?
Well, I raised this up to me. What does the current corporation, by the way, it's going to be funded by Manitoba Hydro. So Manitoba Hydro is going to be funding an organization to reduce its demand on its water. But what they will do is they will, it's essentially allowing wealthy people or people who have acquired some equity in their homes to invest, buy solar panels to reduce their power costs, which are going up, and use a substantial subsidy from Manitoba Hydro to pay for about a third of the capital cost. So, in other words, people who have wealth, one way or another, will be able to buy solar panels and reduce their hydro rate costs at the expense of people who cannot afford to buy solar panels, or renters, or condo owners, and so poor people will pay more, and wealthier people will pay less, and wealthier people's homes will go up in value because they have solar panels. That's the public policy. So if you have equity in your house, or you can get a loan from Manitoba Hydro at 4% interest to pay for solar panels. You'd be crazy not to.
So it's just another windmill deal again.
And windmill. It's on.
I have a question, and this question is probably for you, Greg, and for others in the room who have a whole lot more background and experience in this. But when he was questioned in a public forum about Bill 19, Mr. Pallister said, sort of as an aside, yes, but what if we run out of water? And that was sort of like, huh? Where did this come from? Now, can anybody enlighten me on what that big comment was referring to?
I was just saying, we had a premier once upon a time who said that he was going to turn, Mr. Dewar, was going to turn Manitoba's extra electricity into hydrogen, and that would make Manitoba the energy capital of prairies and displace Alberta. So I did a quick calculation that if we dammed everything we could roughly double what we were making electricity as of 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So if we doubled our capacity and we used that extra, we would still not have enough fuel to do our vehicles. Because at that point we're using 2 billion liters of Alberta oil. So the extra water, the extra power we make is insignificant on a overall energy terms. So, but as far as somebody can interpret what the net will run out of water, but I just meant that premiers make political statements. They aren't, where some of the people in this room are technical.
Well, okay, I could say something. Manitoba Hydro, I used to work for Manitoba Hydro. The Manitoba Hydro anticipates droughts. And what will happen, we do have, at the moment, not including the new Manitoba Minnesota transmission project that's being for the Clean Environment Commission right now, we have about 2,500 megawatts of capacity in the United States. So if we have trouble, what Hydro has done in the past, when I was there, is when we had dry water years, at night, the price of electricity is low and there's lots of surplus electricity floating around in the States because they had a big nuclear plant and they still have it just outside of Minneapolis, Monticello. It's suck all the power into Manitoba. We could hold back the water in the dams. And then next morning when our load goes up, all the water, all the energy we got from the United States, a pretty good price. We were able to release it out through the hydro system. And that system, you'd have to have a pretty bad drought to, even without TS, that we couldn't survive.
Thank you, that's late, because it occurred to me, if we had a drought that was that significant, there's a hell of a lot bigger problem that we've got on our plate than just the hydro. It's that serious.
Well, on that point, if you, like Lake Winnipeg is a natural reservoir, right? So you just need to release a little bit of water out of Lake Winnipeg to generate a lot of power because there's so many dams down here. The other comment I would have, I've heard stories about, well, you know, the Seaway River is flooding a lot more these days. You know, we had that flood in 2011. And then I've heard other people say, you know, it's going to be droughts in the future. So, okay, what is the actual fact? So I looked it up, Google simple search, Stantec Engineering here in Winnipeg did a study on the Seaway River Valley, different modeling, basically no change. Flooding isn't because of more rain or even climate change, as people say. It's because of issues around runoff and so I'm sure we're going to hear that coming up. Fair enough, I'm prepared if anyone raises that issue. But again, it's too easy to say climate change. And people are demonized if they say, well, no, it's not because, but you're denying climate change. That's not what I said. But it's the way drainage is managed, X, Y, Z. There are other reasons why things happen. It's all around. So anyway, I'm prepared with the report. Stantec, that's a good one. Natural Resource Canada has a series of reports. And simple Google searches pull up all sorts of facets.
I said we're currently in year 6 of the solar minimum, which is very difficult. So I'm willing to bet cool really warm for the next, say, 5 years. Carbon dioxide, nothing.
Can you speak louder for everyone?
I'm going to say that we're in year 6 of what's called the solar minimum. And sunspot cycle 24. So the sunspots 24, 25, considered part of the solar minimum, compared to all the solar minimum. And that's a very low blue. So only that cool and low back we have yet is cold weather's been increasing across Canada. This Churchill rail service construction mining result of the cold weather study. Churchill releasing this far gas.
So basically what the gentleman said, for those of that, is his theory is that because of the sun's 11-year cycle, dealing with solar flares and so on, that if anything, it's likely that temperature will be cooling in the near future rather than warming up. And as we were talking about before, when I was a kid, everyone was talking about another ice age. And so now it's the other way around. And it went from global warming to climate change. So, yeah, so whatever. You know, that's a term of public policy debate. But words matter, and the public needs to be constructive in their critique of what is presented by any blood from any background.
Okay, let's take one more question.
You know, I don't understand how come there could be a drought when we have Lake Winnipeg. How does that happen?
It hasn't happened,
That's
but it
right.
has in 1,000.
Not every likely happens.
I can respond to that. The volume in Lake Winnipeg is not enough to take what Hydro considers the most serious drought situation. It's a 5-year drought. So what would happen is Lake Winnipeg would be drawn down, and there are limits on how much Lake Winnipeg can be drawn down. So it's a valuable asset, but it wouldn't by itself take you through a 5-year drought. And to the lady that asked about the relative impact of a 5-year drought and comparing that with the demand side management that is being considered either in Efficiency Manitoba or as it has been handled in the power smart. The Hydro considers that a 5-year drought, and that is a drought that's comparable to one. Graham would know the years. It's about, I think, 15 or 20 years ago. More. About then. That drought was, except for a rate increase that was given to them by the PUB, that drought would have had an impact on bottom line, on the retained earnings of Hydro of about $2 billion. So drought does have potential to be a big impact. However, if you match that against what demand side management could do, and demand side management is important, but I just did a calculation in my head, and I think if I haven't made a mistake, it's about half. In other words, demand side management would contribute about $1 billion worth of power after 10 years of the plan, not just yet, but after 10 years, it would have reached a point where it would be about 1 billion. So therefore, it would help, yes, the Premier is correct in that sense, if whichever Premier wasn't said that, but it's certainly not a match for a big drought. And by the way, I've probably read, I don't know, between 10,000 and 20,000 pages of Hydro general rate applications and the need for an alternative to study. I certainly don't remember all of that, but some of it stuck up here and it allows me to stand up and fire off a few figures from the top of my head.
Well, who sets the criteria for the level of the lake, or what sets the criteria for the level of the lake?
I can't repeat it because I don't retain that, but it's a narrow band of about 3 feet, I think.
What happens if it gets down level?
What happens, I think if it reaches 715 and goes above, the government controls it. If it goes down to 711, the government controls it again, but within that band, Hydro controls it.
Oh, it's not an environmental issue, it's a political issue.
Well, there are people that care about the lake level being too low, cottage owners, fishermen. And erosion, yes, shore erosion is a big one. So there are reasons for regulating it, but certainly within that band in the middle, and mostly it stays within that middle band, it's Hydro's prerogative to whether they open the gates of Genpeg or they don't.
Over the years, I did when they were going to do the floodway expansion, I think mine was the only engineering presentation that wasn't from a big company wanting to do bulldozer work. And they stuck mine off in a church basement, so the media wasn't there. But anyway, it did point out that for less than was spent on the ditch, we could have put many wetlands, thousands of new wetlands or restored wetlands, and put the water that is excess in the spring into the ground. And then about 10 years ago, I did another muncheon. These are Pega muncheons. So I did a Pega muncheon on drainage versus storage, because the government at the time was just into drainage. And I did field visits, like through Saskatchewan, western Manitoba, that you find the creek that used to have a big wide glacial valley, that it flooded once in a while. The creek runs in two little walls, dirt walls, so it can't flood. So that means that when you put 50 of those creeks together into the Assiniboine, they haven't stored water. They were normally 1,000 years ago, they would have flooded, and they don't do it anymore, so that's why the water comes down here. So it was well known at the time, and I tried to get somebody in Manitoba to do a luncheon talk on protecting the West from flooding. This is again about 10 years ago, before we had our big Assiniboine problem, and there was no engineer who could do it. The best I could do was get Beth from Grand Forks. She had done work there. There was a hydrologist there. So it is a big issue. Storing it is a solution. It's a whole evening talk, but it is something that Steven's recognized, that people blame it on something. It's what we have done ourselves, because in the last 100 years, we tile fields like crazy. So what used to sit as 3 inches of water on the field, and if you drive after a thunderstorm, if you drive down a rural road and after a thunderstorm, you'll see pond, dry. And that's the guy who tiled this field. And you tile the field, you put it in a 20-foot ditch that goes right to the creek, or right to the river, and it's wonderful because your plants don't get all wet from the thunderstorm, but it means your groundwater is gone, and your well runs dry, and Winnipeg has a problem. So that's what's happened in the last 100 years, or the last 60 years, is we've gone crazy with the tiling and draining. And when I did my last Pegum talk, I had all of the Manitoba government's flood guys there, and I asked one of them, would you ever be allowed to do, storage projects? And he didn't think it would. So anyway, so it's something.
Okay, I want to thank Steven for taking up so much time with us. I think we're very fortunate to have a politician in MLA that really gets into the issues, that thinks is not bordered by party affiliation. He looks issues and debates and willing to consider change and how it could affect the decisions being made before. So, Steven, I want to thank you very much for coming up and talking to us. I think we're very fortunate to have you as an MLA in Manitoba, and I
Thank you, Graham. I will not be in LA for a long time. It'll be a good time. I'm going to hang out for as long as you want to hang out for. I do encourage you on your way out just to take a look at some of the maps. And most of them are geology and mining and parks and stuff. But there's also like the direction of glaciers and some other things. But I also, to make sure that everyone, I also brought a very large map of the fish habitat in each of our lakes and rivers. And that's the one with the blue and white one behind me. So if you're into fishing or angling, take a look at that map. It's super interesting. Thank you.